Hello and welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary recording in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine and then see if I can guess what their favourite things about each instalment might be.
Hello Toby, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Tom and I'm an associate professor specialising in popular music. Today I'm recommending The Keeper of Traken. Let's see if Toby and I can agree on what makes the story so important and enjoyable.
Well, welcome back to Traken, which is a place that everybody seems to have very much enjoyed hanging about. I hadn't expected this at all. They can surprise you sometimes, these commentaries. I had a glorious time with the Censorites, and you lot did too. And now Keeper of Traken, which I've never disliked, but has always left me feeling slightly underwhelmed. I've been underwhelmed. I've been overwhelmed. I'm never normally in a state of just being whelmed. But anyway, let's say I've been risen to whelmed being whilst I've been watching The Keeper of Traken, and everyone's quite enjoyed joining in. Indeed, I have a special guest has just recorded their commentary for State of Decay, which they'd been promising for some time, but inspired by our time on Traken, that track has now been done. But that means, do I do State of Decay soon, because it's a very special guest, or do I wait, because I can sort of release these when I like, can't I? There's no order. I just try and mix them up a bit, and I have been trying to do a few more new series ones. In fact, I've just watched the Zygon Invasion and the Zygon Inversion just for fun, and not entirely unrelated reasons to some of the things I've said earlier. But and I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I don't think I'd seen that for a while. And now I'm watching the Magician's Apprentice-y one, just because my overwhelming there's a surfeit of whelminess now. By Davros opening his eyes, and so I've watched it again to remember all the bits that weren't that, which I might have found very entertaining. And of course, there's loads in it. So I've got lots of the Peter Capaldi era that I need to go back to and sort of watch just as a punter again for fun, because I think there's all sorts of treats that I'm missing. I was reminded just how good the two leads are, for example, and how many class lines there are, and all sorts of stuff. So that's the beauty of Doctor Who, isn't it? Is that we can revisit it, we can look back at things we've either overlooked or we've not liked because of circumstance or mood or whatever, and find that there's gold there to be had. And also because I'm trying to make life and any broadcasting that I do a positive experience. And that's a struggle today, because the reason I've come to Traken is because I have been wrestling with the BBC's new payment system, which you had this system in the old days where you just send in an invoice and they'd pay you. I mean, it took as long as it's just taken me to say that. Now they have a thing called a payment portal, which you have to log into, and it forgets you every time, or it glitches, or when you do log in it freezes, but fortunately, having just got my password and everything sorted after various back and forths with BBC HR, various departments just ignored me, they've now changed it to a BBC Connect, which is different from the portal, so you need a new password, but of course then my username isn't recognised and I don't get the email that I'm supposed to get in order to access my boom, boom, boom. This is all to get paid the pittance that I get for some of the work I do on the DVD and Blu-rays that you all love. So I want to kill the BBC right now, and I shouldn't want to do that because I love the BBC and I approve of it. But I do wish its admin hadn't fallen into an Orwellian dystopian nightmare and was instead sort of took place in a lovely leafy grove where we're just held together by people being nice to each other. But I'm trying to put a brave face on it because I've wasted a morning. I'd love to invoice them for that morning, but how do I do that? I mean, I can't even get paid for what I have done for them. Oh, anyway, in fact, that's a lie. I have been paid now, but I just need to cross-reference the payments and let the team at the DVD team know what I've received payment for, so they can tick it off their list. Which again, I mean, it sounds like it should be something that just takes seconds, doesn't it? But of course, this has taken months. So. Anyway, I think that's just called sharing, isn't it? Is this a podcast about Doctor Who? No, it's an angry man. But it's because I don't want this to be a sort of cloying optimism fest. Any joy that I might exude or try to feel is often emitted whilst swimming against a tide, whilst batting off slings and arrows and mixing metaphors, I think, there again. No, I suppose somebody could be hurling slings and arrows at me whilst I'm swimming against a tide. I'm just having a terribly bad day or trying to invade a castle via the sea. But anyway, let us instead not go to a castle. Let's go to the domain of Traken, where the people on Patreon have had the chance to watch and listen to episode 3 with me banging on during it, obviously on a day when I hadn't been doing admin, so they were spared any insight into the Kafkaesque processes that go into just getting paid. Anyway, Robbie Carnegie says, I remember so vividly the excitement of the master reveal. Ooh, that's going to happen this week, Robbie. In a way, the memory of that is what always made me think positively of this story. It's certainly one of the biggest memories I have of this story, although I have a number. Particularly enjoyed the relaxed performance of Roland Oliver. It's that man again. We're loving Proctor Neiman. And his costume, lovely waistcoat. Oh, I like a waistcoat. I wear a waistcoat very often. It's not really for fashion as so much as to sort of cover. I tend to stick out in one area in particular. It's quiet at the back. So it just helps contain my tummy a little bit. The costumes generally are really nice here. Just a pity that the lead cast are stuck in some of them for years to come. Yes. Although that said, careful what you wish for, because I have found the Doctor getting changed every week in the latest episodes kind of dilutes the impact of the Doctor. Of course it's more realistic, but I kind of prefer the Doctor to have the same basic silhouette. So yes, I think we're just never happy, are we? I'm sure when the BBC start paying me by brain microchip, I'll be going, oh, wasn't it? It was much better in the days of the payment portal. I just love the way it locked you out every time you tried to use it. Jason Thompson says, I love the cliffhanger to this episode. This is episode 3. One I rated 10 out of 10 on my cliffhangers thread on Twitter, itself inspired by your Indefinable Magic podcast on the subject. If viewers didn't recognise the Master, it had been a little over 4 years since he was last seen, and he never even got a mention since, then the TARDIS sound as Melka disappears and reappears might give it away. Cassia's fate is really quite horrific. I agree that Tom is actually damn good in Season 18. I think people are so used to his absurd excesses in previous seasons, they forgot he's actually a damn good actor. His old Doctor in the Leisure Hive, his fury at the Deciders in Full Circle, his double duty as the Doctor and Meglos. Even the end of episode 3 of Logopolis, when he unleashes a blistering tirade against his companions for getting themselves involved, but follows this up with a lovely little reassuring "Go on, battle stations" to Adric as he goes into the TARDIS, show he is still firing on all cylinders. That's a very good summary of Summer Baker's strengths in Season 18, Jason, thank you. And bad luck on just missing out on the point. I must admit, I had a bit of a laugh when Dr. Tom chose one of the things you'd so nearly gone for with his favourite. Nyssa is great. Yeah, it seems to be my role in life is to just miss out, Jason. Matt Metabilis III. God, I'm self-involved, aren't I? It's all about me and how unlucky I am. Matt the Metabilis III. The 9-year-old me was mourning the loss of Romana and K9 during this story, and I knew we were going to lose Tom soon. It bridges the gap between these events, and although I should have been miserable, I loved the Keeper of Traken. It still fits nicely, carrying the season's strand of melancholy, decay, and changes yet to come. This season had its silliness, the Master's attempted execution by Thames turds, well, that's one way of putting it, Matt, and Adric the mathematical genius questioning if the TARDIS has 43 dimensions because he'd taken that many measurements with his tape measure. But it also delivered. A castle revealed as an ancient spaceship, a pocket parallel universe mysteriously intersecting our own, an infinitely recursive TARDIS folding in on itself, and a massive parallel supercomputer using humans as logic cells. Pretty cool, even if maths isn't your thing. Well, maths isn't my thing, but then again, nor is being cool, Matt. So, sorry if there's a little bit of interference there. My computer is also in dock today, so I'm balancing sort of temporary machines and phones and things. But let's see how we do. It's all about temporary lash-ups saving the day, isn't it, Doctor Who? That's actually that's one I should use for too much information. I always try and do a different description of what Doctor Who is a show about. Doctor Who is a show about temporary lash-ups saving the day. Well, yeah, I'm pleased with that one. I think I'll take the day off. Peter Chamberlain, I'm enjoying this Toby-inspired rewatch more than I expected. End of season 18 feels like everyone waiting for Tom Baker to go. Out goes Romana and K9, then one by one we line up Peter Davison's companions. But Traken is great. Cuddly Ainley is a delight, and Nyssa is wonderful. By the way, I'm surprised that Toby isn't convinced by K9's marksmanship. I've always been sure that there's a beautifully designed nozzle attachment that K9 can adjust with speed and accuracy. Oh, I see, just a bit at the end that's sort of on a sort of gimbal that means he can sort of shoot vertically if needed. Yeah, I suppose. It just doesn't look good though, does it, Peter? It looks but I know your tongue is probably in your cheek when you were saying that. Siobhan Galichon, although it does work, Siobhan Galichon says, oh, this is full of memories. I remember as soon as the end credits finished, I was on electric telephone to my friend, Andrew Smith, no relation, shrieking that it was the Master. This was the season I became a, capital F, fan. James Gould, just catching up for these, and thanks for the patron shout-out on part 2, which was originally broadcast 2 days before I was born. Well, thank you, James, and thanks to everyone who is a patron, and I really like the fact that I'm so disorganised now that I can fit some of your comments in. We, alas, won't have the comments for anyone for episode 4, because when it goes out I will have moved on to Pastures New, which will probably be a new series episode, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm going to try and get a few more of those done. Oh no, I'm going to do the 61st anniversary celebration episode, a bonus. Have you heard it here first? A bonus Happy Times and Places to celebrate Doctor Who's birthday, which will go out on the 22nd of November for patrons and on the 23rd for non-patrons. So patrons will only get it a day early, as opposed to the few months that I try to contrive to have you in advance of everybody else for the kindnesses you bestow upon me. Anyway, here we are. Whether you're a patron or not, you're very, very welcome to this final instalment of The Keeper of Traken. So, shall we have a look what's in store for dear old Doctor Who as this story, his penultimate story, Tom Baker's penultimate story, comes to an end. And we're going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Well, would you believe it? iPlayer has locked me out now. The BBC is listening and confounding me. It's because I'm not on my normal computer, so I just had to sign in then. But I feel if I disappear, if I go and change the time on my clock and suddenly I vanish, I think you should look for. I think somebody at the BBC might be fed up with me. So I'm going to press play. Yes, I have got a TV license. I am going to press play in 3, 2, 1. Well, we got there in the end. Yep, I'm still feeling the warm fires and the rosy cheeks, and as I record this, Christmas is approaching. We're near. Well, we're near it's anniversary week too. But I do like the warm glow of Christmas anticipation. I am a bit of a sucker for it. I'm old-fashioned in that way. I like the nostalgia, and that's what this is, isn't it? I enjoy the fact that watching this is not only an experience of pleasure and familiarity, but it also takes me back to a time. Odd, though. I've talked about this before, how, childhoods aren't necessarily the fondest memories that one has, and yet I'm comforted and consoled by the various things I associate with it. That house that I lived in, that sort of early 80s feeling where houses didn't have central heating. I mean, that house still doesn't have central heating. The cold winter bite, the warm glow of the fire. I even seem to recall that the Sykes' house that I watched the repeat of this in was sort of warm and fiery as well, but that was an old farmhouse. So I do like the fact that Cassia's, that seems really painful, doesn't it? It's not just a crossfade. They've actually gone to the effort to go, oh no, she's being kind of rent asunder. And that's all we see of Sheila Ruskin. She gets a credit. Not always the case when you're just in the recap, but I think she's entitled. And yes, it is a TARDIS. I don't know if I would have picked up on that at the conclusion. I don't know if I would have done. Now, of course, that would have been all over the internet. People would have been there. Did you hear when Melker appeared? It was a TARDIS. Although I suppose having seen having seen Geoffrey Beevers in his makeup, people would have twigged it was the Master. And I mean, somebody would have leaked it from the studio, wouldn't they? Summon Proctor Neiman. Yes, Luvic is a bit hapless, isn't he? I do buy the point that Luvic and Gutcher, they're the sort of Lib Dems of the consul room, aren't they? Of the Traken consulate. They're sort of, maybe I'm being a bit unfair on the Lib Dems. I've voted Lib Dem before in my time, but they are an easy target, aren't they? The sort of the ones who don't really have much impact, but will occasionally ally themselves with one or the other. I think something I haven't talked about is Tom Baker and Anthony Ainley. I think as Tremas and the Doctor have a very nice rapport. Tom Baker can do that sometimes, where he sort of takes an actor into his into his trust, if you like. And I think he has that with Ainley, which is interesting because Ainley was, I think, quite a tricky and strange figure. But who knows if he was on this particular production? I wonder. Sometimes television shows can make monsters, can't they? And maybe he, on his first show, he was not sure. Although I heard lots of different things about Ainley. Some people who say he was an absolute joy and lots of fun, and some people say he was a bit odd. Well, I think even the ones that liked him say he was a bit odd, but odd can be good and odd can be bad. Sometimes odd people, especially on the studio floor, can be a bit of a pain. But he's an enigma. I haven't really got an angle on Ainley, and some people I've interviewed haven't really got an angle on Ainley. But I kind of like that because it means a bit like when we were watching The Ambassadors of Death, where one of the things Mark Wright scored about it was the fact that it was slightly beyond us. It was slightly, oblique, if you like. That I think Ainley has that. Although we're familiar with him as the Master, it still seems odd to me that he plays this trustworthy Tremas character, and it's a sort of almost a pleasant surprise of, oh yeah, he does that for a story. But also, I still don't quite have a feel for Ainley the man, so therefore I've only got to go on what's on the screen, which means there is a level of sort of mystery that I rather like. Blocking, Nissa, means when somebody stands in front of you when you're on the stage. So here's Neiman's waistcoat. It is good. I suspect a lot. I suspect these were great costumes to wear. Maybe very hot under the studio lights. But I've enjoyed the Proctor Neiman love that we've had during this. Do you know what? I'm going to email him. you heard it here first. I can't edit it out now. Let's see if I can get a bonus interview. I've tried to stop interviewing people because I find I get really nervous contacting people, and then I feel physically sick when I'm doing it. And I've got somebody else I need to contact for too much information, which I've been delaying because I need to. And it's somebody that I've interviewed. It's somebody whose house I've been to, but I always feel like I'm bothering people. But there, I've committed now. I'm presuming that's a bald cap. Well, that's what I would have to ask the man. So if there's not a bonus interview, you know that I've either bottled out or he's told me to sod off. But I have been in his vicinity. I think I mentioned this. He was doing a play at the Royal Exchange when I was doing another one. So we kind of know each other. Oh, and I did mention that we've not found Liam Prendergast, the foster. Well, since I mentioned that, and now one of my cohort of actor trackers, Stephen Griffiths, he, Ben Jolly, and I are the sort of the three who rule the obscure corners of the internet where one can track down people long lost. And he has found Liam Prendergast. Actually, with not that much difficulty, but he had been on our list, and I hadn't done a search since that list was compiled a couple of years ago. And I'd got some details off the BBC, an old address, and I sent that to the boys. And Stephen came back and said, "Oh no, look, Liam Prendergast's here." So we know. So that's another one off the list. It just goes to show that if at first you don't succeed, you can foster a relationship with. We haven't contacted him or anything, but we know where he is. Stephen might have done, but I haven't. Look at that. That's a lovely stick-on beard, isn't it? We've sort of lost the art of stick-on beards, but they always wobble a bit, don't they? In a way that your actual beard. If that was a real beard, I suspect it wouldn't wobble quite so much. No, that's not a bald cap. Or is it? I don't know. Whatever it is, it's very good. When I've been in the presence of Roland, he had less hair on top than that. Look, let's not get bogged down. But whatever it is, that's definitely a stick-on moustache. Oh, and look at what they've done to his eyebrows. He's got Dennis Healey eyebrows. They've really paid some attention to the keep the facial hair on Traken. I like that very much. Never mind the keeper of Traken, who is the hairdresser of Traken. Now, this is what I remember a lot about season 18, is lots of words like recursive, a recursive integrator. And I feel fine about that sort of science. I think if you just do it with a level of conviction, it's fine. And as I say, I prefer that to if it had been, the portal of ISIS, the invocation of ISIS that needed, hair of bat and eye of newt or whatever. I need it to be buttons and numbers. The source manipulator. He gets cross with him here, doesn't he? Yeah, it's really good. Because I think Tremas is a great character, actually, and again he gets lost in the light of the Master, or the darkness of the Master. And I like the way Tom pulls the face as well. Yeah, he's great, Ainley. They do have the eyes thing, don't they? Everyone seems to they haven't quite talked about why it is that the eyes are the target of any of Melka's malfeasance rays, but they are. I like this, but I remember thinking this was very clever as a kid. And again, I like the kind of easy bond these two men have, and that sort of level of understanding. But I remember it's one of those great moments as a kid when you're watching it. You go, oh, the Doctor's saying because he's shown it to him, that means that he can destroy it now because the Doctor's remembered it. And this is always fun. And this is quite an 80s thing as well. Maybe it's just this and the Five Doctors, but burning scrolls and things, they all seem to be part of the furniture. You go, oh, well done, Roland Oliver, there for... I might now praising his performance, so that he'll say, yeah, I mean, we have been praising his performance all through, but it's like, well, if I praise him here, he might say yes when I email him later, even though he won't have heard it. I don't like this bit because it's not brilliantly staged, but also you'd have to really whack people's heads really hard together in order to knock them unconscious, which means that's a severe bit of damage. And actually, banging your head is quite hard. Banging your head on somebody else's head is really horrible. Banging three heads together, but it's because it's one of those sort of short, I prefer a cleaner sort of, I'd rather have a karate chop to the back of the neck than that slightly messy and slightly grim, three heads thing. But, it's just a way of going. It's like a lot of those things in the 80s where something that was a sort of seen as a child-friendly injury was actually something quite... knives were seen as less violent than guns, so people got knifed all over the place in Doctor Who and other programmes, because I suppose guns you would see sort of exploding bullets if done properly, where a knife you could just embed in somebody, and that, so it was a sort of slightly cleaner death. So knives were much more acceptable, and in the same way that knocking people out was fine. That's a fine bit of Doctor Who business that you have to do, is not quite get to a closed door and then sort of look around and bang it in frustration. It's the sort of thing that you have to do when you can't cut away as quickly as we cut away now, or it's the sort of thing that we would be covered a little bit better now. But they did that fine. But also knocking people out, which is why a stun weapon, which is why the ion bonder is so cool, because it's a clean way of knocking people out. Because actually, to get knocked out, I don't know if any of you have ever been knocked out, but, in drama, it's something, certainly dramas of this kind, it's something that people recover from quite well. If you're knocked unconscious, you're concussed. You have to go to hospital to check that there's no damage. But in sort of drama like this, it's a shorthand for temporary incapacitation, after which you're absolutely fine. Whereas, major head trauma is not something you particularly want to undergo. So, Nyssa there, Micro. Oh, yes, the rings in the thing. I quite like that. I think that's quite fun. It's all been thought about rather nicely. Oh, but yes, and it all... So it all... Oh, I love an exploding console. Again, this is something that reminds me very much of my childhood, is exploding consoles. Oh, it's the wind again. I did like the wind last time. And these two sort of chatting away on the floor, I seem to recall as being rather fun. Again, there's a nice bond between the Doctor and Tremas. 337, yeah. So this is where Doctor Who does its sort of maths, isn't it? Where for all the highfalutin talk, essentially the Doctor's going to save the day here by punching three numbers into a keyboard. But it's hard won, and I think that that wind is excellent. But and now having the Doctor in the thrall, and being, he's not struggling against it in a way that I think Tom Baker in some moods might have done. You know how he sort of struggles against Sutekh, and it's really kind of like, oh, I'm really struggling with this. It's a bit like when he gets taken over from Meglos. It's like, I think he would say he was sort of underplaying it, but I sometimes fear he's just going, yeah, I'm going to do it. I think he's daring the director to say, can you put something a bit more into it? Because yes, I can see he's sort of expressionless, but and maybe it's because, unlike Anthony Ainley, I've got a bit more of an insight into Tom Baker's character. is that he goes, well, I'll just do blank, and I'll just sit down, I'll just kneel down here. Tremas had a bit of agency there because he thought he was coming to talk to Melker, but actually the reason he was doing it was so that he could stick his ring in and key the number. Oh, and now you see he's really fighting against it. So here comes Neiman, who has. I mean, he only failed Melker because the doctor smashed his head against two other people's heads. But this is grim. I mean, this is grim. This is really, really good. I mean, Neiman as a character needs to get his just desserts. He's been conniving and self-serving, and we've not liked him from the beginning, but we've quite enjoyed not liking him. And I think Roland Oliver is excellent, and he doesn't give it too much. And I think these stories benefit from these sorts of characters really well. And of course, they serve a useful purpose. If you need a bit of drama, that somebody needs to be killed, and this is it's an odd. Well done. And he dies very well, and he falls into the jail, and the laser beam is nicely keyed. It doesn't have to come out at a silly angle. I'm being phoned by John Levine, would you believe, live. So I'm going to have to refuse that call. But I will call him back. But there's an insight into my life. I mean, Tom Baker there looks a bit sort of. Yes, maybe I was a bit unfair on him because he's not allowed to do much in this scene, so he's gone for completely impassive, and it is a bit alarming seeing the Doctor like that. So maybe I'll give him a break. But that scene where Tremas shoots Neiman and then goes to shoot himself somebody being forced to kill themselves is horrific. That's worse than. That's worse. And the season 18 theme is, of course, my voicemail ringtone. So John has left a message. Sorry, I'm going to keep all of that in. Well, I have to because it's live. Who would have thought that one day the younger me watching this would, for whom all of these people were so unreachable, and magical. I mean, really, in that cold winter house in the middle of nowhere, this was my magic ball. And this is quite a sort of fairy tale-like story, isn't it? And there's bits of that to a lot of season 18, aside from the maths. There is a lyrical quality to a lot of it, particularly this one, but also aspects of Warrior's Gate and State of Decay have that kind of sort of children's literature-y stuff about it, with banqueting halls and all this costuming and the design. It was a wardrobe door to some Never Never Land. I know that's a complete mix of references. My God, I'm addled. But who'd have thought that one day I would be watching it? Some people would be listening to what I'm banging on about, and during it, I'd be contemplating emailing a guy in it that I've met, whilst Sergeant Benton phones me up. There we go. The Master. Here we are. I don't know if his teeth are painted onto his lips. I don't know if that's not just cracked white lips. I've had. I used to get chapped lips. Did you use chapped lips and chilblains? They're very 1980s. And I used to get sort of, not sleep dust, but a sort of thing all along my eyelashes that was like sort of dry skin. It was like, and I used to pick at it, and it was horrible. And I thought I was stuck with that for life. Poor old Roland Oliver's still dead in the corner there, bless him. And he's not breathing. He's doing very well. But yeah, chapped lips and athlete's foot and all those things. Do you just grow out of those, or did we just manage to get rid of them in the 80s? Because I used to get all of that stuff. I used to have a terrible ingrowing toenail as well. So just various bits. Oh, and what are those things called that stick out the side of your fingernails, that little thing that can be really sharp and painful. Anyway, I'm banging on about that. Oh, it's because the Master is sort of, afflicted with this painful body that he has, including what has been suggested in some references is teeth painted onto his lips. But I think you could say it's sort of dried chap lips. And I now like to think of him having terrible cuticles. Are they called cuticles on his fingernails? Dreadful athlete's foot. Oh, an ingrowing toenail that's sort of soft and got stripy bits on it. One of my toenails is worse than the others because it had a terrible. I think it had a terrible time when I was younger, and it's never quite recovered. Anyway, let's not. But yeah, your body was a battleground, wasn't it, of different bits and bobs? But I think I have things wrong with my body now, but we sort of grow out of some of those things that seem like they might be permanent ailments. But I suppose it's when your body's changing when you're a youngster. Anyway, why have I talked about special bodily afflictions of 1980s growing youngsters when I've got the return of the master here? As I say, I didn't really know. I think Geoffrey Beevers is excellent, by the way. He has a perfect voice. It's a very short performance, and he is like a ghoul. And I love the way he sort of hovers over the Doctor to sort of take over his body and really anticipates sort of doing so. I think that's really well done. It's a great cameo. I'm not quite clear how the Doctor jumping through that window gets him out of there, but I suppose the journey is probably more interesting than the this is a sort of slightly cheaty ending that they've got this. You've just got to type in 3 numbers and the Doctor jumps out the Master's window or whatever. But it's I don't think it really matters. I think the rest of the story has such a and how does that panel work and all that, so it has such a sort of unique feel about it and very much its own thing going on that I think we forgive the sort of slightly vague aspects of the demon, and I sort of like the fact that Luvic, the slightly useless one, the leader of the Lib Dems gets to sit in the seat of government for a bit. Of course, it ends up being quite short-lived and everyone dies, but at least he gets a go. And I know how Tremas feels. I was alluding to it before, wasn't it? Tremas is exactly how I feel. You're just out of the room when there's a chance for something really good to happen to you. Though, as it turns out, I'm not sure I'd want to be keeper, as he says. And there was a lot of love, wasn't there, for this Doctor? And I like him without the jacket too. That's another great waistcoat. But the Dr. Adric TARDIS team that is only really together for this and the beginning of Lugahulis, I think actually really, really, really works. Yeah, and so that's an argument to ignore sometimes what we know about behind the scenes, because I might not consider the Doctor and Adric's rapport that they have. So yes, Geoffrey Beevers as the Master, who got sacrificed at the altar of Athlete's Foot. And I'd occasionally get quite a sore belly button as well. Does things just hurt when we're young? Anyway, but chilblains, because I used to go outside in the winter, and I quite often with bare feet because I'm really lazy to go and get wood and things like that. And then you'd come in and be by the hot fire, and that would give you chilblains. And chilblains were a beggar. I haven't had a chilblain for years. But I remember this starkly. So I've always associated the Master with the clock. Although not a very sturdy clock there, but I didn't really understand what was going on here. And I think I had to get one of my brothers to explain. And I think it was actually a good move to have the Master look like the old Master, because much as the Doctor thrives on being a different Doctor every time, if you're bringing back the Master to fulfill his, villainy of before, I think of the way that the show was at this time, I don't think having a kind of, Delgado Mark II style is a bad move, even though it's been quite interesting having different renditions of the Master that are now like the renditions of the Doctor. But I think for the 80s this was a useful way of doing it. And I have mixed feelings about Ainley. I used to, when I discovered Delgado, I was very, very sniffy about Ainley, because Ainley was on telly when I was watching it, so obviously not as good as the stuff that was on telly before I was born, which was where it was really happening. But I enjoy him now. It is a sort of fairly pantomimic performance, and there's a bit of camp about it, and I think Delgado is infinitely superior. Amy Roberts and Norma Hill. Norma Hill, you've been tweaking eyebrows, makeup lady. I don't know anything about Norma Hill, but Amy Roberts I have met and like very much, and is a very, very skilled artisan. And I think it's nice saying executive producer, Barry Letts. I used to think the word was executive. I didn't know what it was. It was only when I heard the word executive sometime later. It was one of those light bulb moments where you go, oh, it's executive. I'm sure I've told this before, but I've done it with, Determined on the back of Target books, Determined, and The Shop Wurstmouth, which I couldn't get my head around at all until suddenly I'd heard people talk about W.H. Smith for years, and then suddenly I was like, oh, Wurstmouth is W.H. Smith. Yeah. But I've done a whole podcast about that, so I'm sure that's old news to regular listeners. Think of it as a pleasing reference to stories gone by, which this era of Doctor Who starts to be full of. So there's a warning not to do that too often, because familiarity can breed contempt, especially if I do the Wurstmouth anecdote and I'm played by a different actor, or I have a different design. Let's not get into that, though. So I have to choose my favourite thing about The Keeper of Traken, episode 4. It's a tricky one, this, isn't it? There's much to talk about. I love Geoffrey Beevor's Master. I'm so glad that Big Finish has given us a chance to get more of him, because obviously he was cast as an interim. He was cast as a placeholder before the man who'd been cast in the continuing role, Anthony Ainley, took over. But he has that wonderfully sort of treacly voice that can do such gloating evil, but also it has a kind of sensual lightness about it, and he's such an unassuming chap, Geoffrey. But he's got his voice is a fantastic instrument, and exactly right for this sort of role. So it's only sort of in latter years that I've sort of considered his Master anything other than a kind of stopgap between, because he's not even credited as the Master. He's Melkur, really. As far as the production is concerned, Melkur is, yes, temporary housing for the Master before the decaying Master gives way to the Master proper, in inverted commas. But as a performance in its own right, it's you can hear him sort of luring Cassia into his web. And he's got quite a spidery voice as well, hasn't he? And it's a great visual. I do slightly miss the boiled egg eyes of the deadly assassin, which look so wonderful in photographs in particular, I have to say. But the more mobile mouth that the Beavers version has is better in that sense than the Pratt, which is just a bit too. There's that picture of the Pratt Master from the Deadly Assassin where he looks like the undead, and it's incredible. The black and white picture that was the sort of first I saw of him, that was the basis for the Target cover and stuff. But actually, when you see it moving about, it's not quite as effective, just because the mouth is so restricted. So I actually like the fact that whether it's painted on teeth or not, the beaver's mouth is as mobile as yours or mine. I do like Anthony Ainley as Tremas, and I like the relationship he has with the Doctor in the same way that Adric and Tom Baker have that sort of good rapport. I like the way that Baker acts with Ainley, and Ainley responds. They do seem to have a bit of a connection as performers, and I like all that stuff with, as I say, them on the floor, and when the wind has been unleashed, and particularly that bit in Tremas's office where they do the cunning bit with the plans for the source manipulator. I like that Luvic gets made Keeper of Traken. I think that's quite sweet and fun. I like the fact that Margot van der Burr is back after a many years gap since the Aztecs. I like it when the sort of period when I was watching Doctor Who as a kid reaches back to the golden ages before I was born, because I would have had no clue at the time, and I remember being very excited to realise that I had watched Doctor Who stories that had people in who'd been in Doctor Who stories I would have no chance of possibly seeing because they were on before I was born, and I was so pleased to discover later on that that had been part of my viewing without me knowing it, because of course when Keeper of Traken was on I didn't know there was such a thing as the Aztecs, let alone who was in it. So I was always pleased when I found that sort of thing out. I think in any other story, because I sort of scuppered myself, because with episode 1 I chose Traken itself, and I think in that I probably, and partially because of the way Tom phrased his choice, in any other story Amy Roberts' costumes would have got a nod, Tony Burrow's brilliant designs would have got a nod, but I think they've probably been swept up in the whole Traken discussion that Tom and I had independently, but together in episode 1. So I won't be choosing those, whereas they would be a great call for the bonus thing, and are I think probably the headline news of this story is those visual elements, and a nod to Norma Hill and her makeup too now, especially that I can see Proctor Neiman's eyebrows have had special attention, and I always like a bit of special attention to the eyebrows. The young people, they shave them off and draw them back on again, which I think is absolutely bananas. So I'm far more of a if add Dennis, add a touch of Dennis Healy to them. So I won't be choosing those, even though were it possible, or were circumstance not to have ended us up where we did with earlier instalments, they would have been a no-brainer. But I think they kind of were included in part 1. But I come back to I really do like the scene where Neiman gets killed and then the Master forces Tremas to put the gun to his head. I think in a story that is, thought of as being a bit sort of lyrical and, rhubarbing locals at gates and that sort of thing, and elegant costume design, to have a character kill another character is horrible. There's something about the inability to move your own body. It's like it's real nightmare stuff, isn't it? That idea that, and I have it in nightmares all the time, where I want my body to do something and it cannot. This is a perverse extension of that, where not only are you not in control of your body, but actually somebody is manipulating it to do a terrible thing. So Tremas kills Neiman, but against his own will. And it's a lovely bit of plotting as well, because and character, because Neiman needs his comeuppance, but the way that he has it is pretty grim and horrible. So it serves two purposes. It's funny that how we kind of have a need to see someone get killed. It's awful, isn't it? But in this kind of adventures, it's sort of part of the punctuation, and we go, yeah, no, that's okay. We needed to see him die, and it's sort of a bit disappointing if they don't. Which is why, much as it's refreshing that General Carrington and Captain Dent, two great villains from the Pertwee era, don't get killed, you also kind of do feel slightly cheated, I think. But. And this goes to a perverse extent in American films, where, of course, the ultra baddies, I'm thinking of Cyrus the Virus in Con Air or whatever, where he gets killed not once, twice, but 3 times. It's like, we'll shoot him, but then we'll drop him off a building, but then the building will hit an oil tank, and the oil tank will explode, and then he'll fly out of the exploding oil tank and land on a spike, and then that spike will get anthrax and the clap, and and that to me is a very America has taken that idea of a sort of, that we punctuate adventure dramas with the death of the villain and gone, but we and we sort of go, I'm slightly uneasy about the fact that I enjoy that. American films go, no, don't be uneasy. In fact, have the satisfaction of seeing them die more than once and in increasingly colourful ways. I'm not sure what that says about us. I mean, it is contained within fiction, and we're all intelligent enough to know that it's fiction. And maybe it satisfies something within our psyche, some sort of fantasy. I mean, I have to say, when I'm walking around the park, I spend a lot of my time, if I'm not fantasizing about, car boot sales with cans of missing episodes or winning the lottery, it is largely doing kung fu on people that have irritated me in the past, for whom I wish I'd had a bon mot or a fancy move. I'm not talking about people I know, in conversation. I'm talking about random encounters where strangers have been rude or antisocial or something like that, and I've wished I could. I was going to say put a cap in their asses, but I'm not a cap in ass kind of guy. But I am a karate chop or a what are they called? A roundhouse kick, sort of, to somebody who's a bit bloody mouthy, or vaping on the tram, or being rude to me, or whatever. So I do fantasize about sort of violence, if you like, without ever having been in a violent situation at all in my life. So perhaps fantasy and storytelling and adventure, do something in order to exercise that muscle within us that maybe we have an animalistic desire to take part in all of that sort of stuff. And one of the way we work those things out of our system is to have them in fantasy, so that actually, instead of encouraging violence or desensitizing us to violence, it can sort of it can satisfy our craving for it. Not that I crave violence, but I do. As I say, I would like to dispense justice. But there is something. But I'm talking about, as I say, that in drama, seeing those things play out, there is an element where we go, well, that's the right way. So even though I'm not a capital punishment sort of chap, it seems right that Neiman is killed. But the fact that they then make such a virtue of that dramatic necessity by making it a horrible sequence, I think is well played by all. And it means that I get to include Roland Oliver in our list of things that we like. And his performance, I think, has particularly stood out. He's been a particularly effective character, even though he's not one of the sort of ranking characters really in the drama, but he's played a really useful part in the story as a character, Neiman, and I think Roland Oliver has invested him with all the sort of anxiousness and the sort of conniving, creepy quality that he needed without overplaying it. And to top that off, then Tremas has to put the gun to his head, which he does without question. And because the master still needs him, he have that nifty little effect where I assume it's on the end of a fishing wire, and it kind of and it pulls it out. But that bit where Tremas, with powerlessly, blankly points the gun to his own head, I think is again, it's another one of those sort of nightmarish things. It's bad if the master kills someone. It's even worse if the master makes somebody kill themselves and indeed kill somebody else. So it's a useful scene for the master as well, because it's saying this isn't just any old villain. This is a villain that will make the Doctor sit by helplessly whilst a man is killed and then a friend of his potentially kills himself. Yes, I'm talking that scene up. I think I have to choose that scene for episode 4. So then I think it's going to have to be a battle, because I think Tom has also kind of chosen Ainley as Tremas as well. He's sort of covered him in some of his contributions hitherto. So I think it's a battle now between me giving a nod to Geoffrey Beevers as the master, because I think he does as good a job as possible, as important a job as possible within the confines of the story. And but also, if you take those small number of scenes that he has I think it's a great costume. I think he capitalizes upon the fact that the master is this sort of ghoulish cadaver, and he has that wonderful voice, which is very useful when he's just a sort of a presence off camera, and Melker is largely the statue guy, and the fact that what amounts to a sort of 2-scene cameo really has lasted and become a legitimate incarnation of the master that's lived on in audio, and I think he's absolutely superb in those. And that master, when they did Davros Omega and the master for Big Finish, that was a really strong set of releases. I remember feeling Big Finish was on a real high. At that point, I was just getting into listening to them, and I remember those ones being really special. But maybe there's not enough of that in Keeper of Traken that will, I think, make it lose out, just because it's a profound childhood memory. Because I think it's a moment a lot of us remember. Even though I didn't really get who the master was or what that was all about and had to have that explained to me because I wasn't old enough. So even without the context, it wasn't a kind of, it's the macro moment and you go as a fan, oh wow, it's the macro, but that doesn't really mean anything in Gridlock beyond that, because they're nothing like, they don't do anything that the macro do apart from, be crabby and have claws. But it was a lovely moment. I love that moment, and who knows, when we do Gridlock, I might choose that. But but I would put my hands up and say that is entirely me as a fan going, oh, you mentioned the monster from 1967 that nobody can see because none of the episodes exist, but that's what keeps me alive. This, I wasn't going, OMG, it's because we spoke properly in those days. I wasn't going, Cripes, Cripes is much better than OMG. Cripes, it's the master, because I didn't know that. But it was well done enough, it was creepy enough. Even though it's not a particularly fancily executed scene, there's something about that horrible creature coming out of the clock. There's something about the clock, and I didn't quite know what was happening. I didn't know why the clock had made Tremus freeze or anything like that. So I wasn't entirely sure what was going on, and yet it stuck with me. I remember where I was sitting. I remember watching, and I remember talking to my brothers about it afterwards. And then I remember, I'm sure on the repeat, when seeing it again, because I knew that was coming, and thinking then, oh yeah, that story actually ended on a cliffhanger, and thinking that's the thing we forget about in the 80s, that they do that occasionally, like when Nyssa collapses at the end of 4 to Doomsday because her contract has the flu, and or Tegan staying behind at the end of Time Flight Part 4. There was the occasional sort of Hartnell-esque end of story cliffhanger. Which at the time seemed to be the sort of thing they didn't really do in Doctor Who, even though it had a precedent from before, and Doctor Who's done it. Faceless runs into either the Daleks, various bits and bobs often. But it just seemed like the sort of thing Doctor Who didn't do. So to have the story end, but then end on this dark note, you go, oh, really? What's going on there? Which meant that I was so pleased when Nyssa turned up in Logopolis. That felt kind of right. Nyssa gets the end of the story. It's just such a profound memory from my childhood, and it's not a big shock moment, it's not a big monster moment, but it is a moment that sticks in my mind. And as I say, not from a story that I particularly was cock-a-hoop about, but it's one of those ones etched in my head, and that's what Doctor Who does, isn't it? It gets into the nooks and crannies, and there are so many things in my life that I forget and that I've forgotten. Some of them happened last week, but some of them I treasure those things that tie me to my childhood, because I think those things are important to our identity and to our perspective. You look back on childhood, and you sometimes sort of go, oh, God, I wish I knew then what I know now. But also I sort of go, oh, I wish, it's a reminder to have, that propensity for wonder that I had then that is so easy to lose now. I find that connection to a world that's lost. A lot of people from that time and now dead. I mean, my family still live in the same house, so that's something. At least I have that. I would be sad if that childhood home was not around anymore. As I say, even though my childhood was not a barrel of laughs, but that was partially due to being, I think, quite an emotional and sort of raw child after my dad left. We weren't, we weren't. I wasn't unsafe, but there wasn't a lot of emotional support, shall we say? So I was pretty much on my own emotionally. So anything that gave me excitement and made life seem a bit less scary, I went to a scary TV program. But no, it was an escape, wasn't it? It was an escape. I think that's what it was. And as I say, I'm not going to paint a sort of Dickensian childhood, but all difficulties are relative, aren't they? And I certainly, I was quite a feared and quite, as I say, quite a raw kid, and Doctor Who was tacitly understood was my special thing, and most of my childhood memories are associated with Doctor Who, and I think that's such a good thing. So slightly personal, but I just know from the comments as well that I am not alone in that moment being a big memory. So I'm going to choose the scene where Trimas shoots Niemann and then nearly shoots himself under the thrall of the Master's gaze, and then the scene where Trimas is, I'm saying Trimas like Seron does, where Trimas is overtaken by the Master at the end of the episode, a cliffhanger no less, at the end of Tom Baker's penultimate story, which also I think helps you to feel like you're building to an important conclusion, which of course this was the departure of the longest running Doctor, in my case the only Doctor I'd seen. Had I? Yeah, the only Doctor I'd seen at that point. So, this had to be big news, especially as in his final story he spends quite a lot of it brooding in the TARDIS in a lay-by or on a boat over the Thames, or just a lot of bridges and looking at people in the distance, and then Abacus wrangling on an alien planet. Anyway, I do quite like Legopolis, but at the time it did seem a very odd choice for the climax to the reign of the longest running Doctor. Maths in a lay-by. But I'm sure we will talk about that. If the person who's chosen Legopolis sends it, was claimed very, very early by actually a Doctor Who VIP, I must give him a nudge. Anyway, that's a story for another day, because a Doctor Who VIP has done State of Decay. And somebody, wonderful, has done Leisure Hive, which I do have. I do have the Leisure Hive, which I really like and gets a bad press. Full Circle has been claimed, but not given to me. Warrior's Gate has been claimed by somebody who's a VIP sort of outside of Doctor Who, but a good name, but also has not sent it in, so I might have to put some of these back out for tender. Anyway, I've got plenty still to do, but I'm going to nominate those, but with the proviso that I would choose as the best thing, I think, all round about Keeper of Traken is the design in terms of costume, makeup and set. Well, particularly costume and set, really. That's no shade on the makeup. It's just that there's not an awful lot of it. Actually, the Master's makeup is very good. But I probably couldn't single out Neiman's eyebrows. I'd be struggling if it's like, I think I'm gonna choose as my favourite thing some eyebrows. But overall, it's beautifully designed, albeit in a style that would no longer be acceptable on television. But there's a lot of things that are no longer acceptable on television that I think are marvellous, and there are some things that are acceptable on television that I think are dog shit. So, I don't normally swear, but it just seemed the right word at the right time. I do apologise. So listen up. Let us see what Dr. Tom, has chosen for his things from episode 4, and his bonus thing. Mine happens to be from episode 4 as well. But let's see. He is under no obligation to do that. Let's see what he's got.
Episode 4. This episode, the big news is the return of the Master. We haven't seen him since The Deadly Assassin in 1976. As a child, the Master was a fictional villain that I'd only read about and never seen. And to cap it all, the costume was terrifying. It's just an animated corpse menacing the Doctor. So, the return of the Master and his return until the end of the classic series was set up right here, so that's the big deal. A bonus thing for the whole story. At the end, there's a sense of cadence rather than conclusion. So although the story concludes with the appointment of a new keeper, we see that the master steals a new body and escapes with a demonic laugh. So, despite the day seeming to have been won on Traken, we know that for both the Union and the Doctor, time is running out, and they're heading towards certain and complete disaster. So, the story ends on a cliffhanger. Can anyone else name more stories that end by leading directly into the next adventure? So maybe Fort of Doomsday or Village of the Angels.
Well, I should have known he would choose the Master. And yes, I don't think I do. I mean, I complimented the makeup, but the costume is very good. I think that whole look for the Master is very, very effective. Although, of course, it must have been a shock to people for whom the Master was a suave, bearded villain. I think I talked about this with Deadly Assassin, to have him as this sort of vengeful ghoul, this corpse, this decaying phantom, especially if you'd and known of the circumstances of Roger Delgado not playing the role anymore, that he was dead, to have the sort of undead in the role. I think it's a potentially distasteful call, and I suspect if you'd taken a character today, say if Russell T Davies had resurrected a Doctor Who character that had only ever been suave and fun villain and blah, 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 and made and recast and also made it this decaying monster, you'd go, that is a complete betrayal of what that character is. That is not what the Master is. But obviously that's not the choice of what this story does, and I've discussed Deadly Assassin, which is a favourite of mine. But I do have to acknowledge that it is a big change from what the Master had been in the show, and I can understand people who might react against that, particularly as Doctor Who fans. We always celebrate its change by saying how much we don't like it when things within it change, and I do speak for myself there. That's exactly what I'm like. So in a way, this story serves to do what probably the Doctor Who fan, including myself, instinct would be to do, which is to say, no, if you're going to bring the Master back, make him like the Master I remember. And if because the actor is dead, you have to then have an actor that is at least giving an approximation of that type of character. So yes, of course, there are differences, and he goes in different directions. He is definitely intended to be an echo of the Pertwee era Master. So it's almost sort of having JNT having given the show such a makeover with the titles and the music and the feel and everything like that. Here with the Master, he goes, no, we're going to kind of go back to how that character should be. So I think that's a really interesting point in the sort of development and history of the show. And I'm only banging on about it now because it's only when talking out loud that I think about this stuff that was present. It was in the present when I was watching Doctor Who, is now part of its history, and now that I see, where it was in its own terms in the history of Doctor Who, it was that was quite an interesting development, and as Tom acknowledges, it was not just reintroducing the Master for this. What's to be the trilogy of the Master's return, if you like, but also the fact that he then becomes a mainstay of the show until it ends, and indeed is in that very last story in 1989. So that's interesting to talk about it from its historical perspective, because of course I at the time didn't feel like I was part of history. There were old Doctor Who things where the Sonic Screwdriver's first appearance or whatever, and the first appearance of the Cybermen, which were sort of milestones of their own, but actually Keeper of Traken, in terms of what it does to the Master and the groundwork that it lays for what is to come, is different decisions could have been made, and this one is quite a conservative decision, because it's about going back to the way things used to be rather than reinventing the wheel, and I think that's just worth sort of noting and observing. So I didn't get that, but I liked the way that Tom described it, though it doesn't end with a sense of conclusion, but with a sense of cadence. I like that. I think that's So it's just it's a musical it's a musical thing, isn't it? It's the way a piece of music sort of ends, but without it being a sort of climax or a crash bang wallop. Trust Tom to use a musical phraseology, but I think it's apt, and I enjoyed that. So I get the bonus. With Tom. So I've done okay. I got the first one and I got the last one. And if I'd got the Iron Bonder, I'd have only bloody won the whole thing. So there we go. And I probably could have guessed that I should have chosen the Master, but it doesn't matter. I'm choosing to end on a sense of cadence rather than a huge climax, something like that. Well, I've enjoyed The Keeper of Traken much more than I thought I would. I thought I would sort of have to tread water or mark time or just talk about Burgundy a lot. But I actually found a lot to discover in that, and as I say, particularly its sort of place in the history of the show, that what it must be like to come to it, if you were born after it or whatever. It probably must seem like an interesting fork in the road in many, many ways, whereas to me it was just the latest Doctor Who story, but clearly one that stuck in my mind very, very well indeed. So I've enjoyed that. It's always nice to be in the orbit of Dr. Tom, who I met once, very, very briefly, many, many years ago, and he was such a nice man, and and we had a good time when he came to see my show, and I sort of always thought, I'd like to get to know him better. I'd like to sort of hook up with him, and it never kind of happened. And then I got him on board for the Blue Dot Festival, and so we saw each other then, having not really been in much contact beyond messages here and there. And I'd like to think I've helped getting involved in a couple of other things. He's an interesting, and we of course did that Race and Time podcast that I thought was worth a bash, worth considering, and having somebody erudite and who has knowledge and perspective on those sorts of issues, and was I thought really, really good value. So Tom is an asset to the great sort of landscape of Doctor Who discussion, but he's also a really sound, nice guy, and I'm really glad that he's lent his voice to this. And I hope if you weren't only slightly aware of him and what he does, that this might improve that situation, and that you can sort of go and seek him out. I'll give the details of his social media, etc., in the closing titles. But that's nice. What fun it was to take this podcast about people just sitting around and generally being nice about things, to that planet where people sit around and generally very nice to each other. And I hope this has been nice for you, and that nice is a terribly cloying word in the wrong when it's too repeated, though, isn't it? Or when it's used in the wrong circumstances. So and I never know if the biscuits should be pronounced nice or nice. I always think they're nice, but people do think that. I think if they're called nice, that's a bit. I think that's a bit poor. Whereas if they're called Nice, but are they made in Nice? I don't know. Do you call them nice or Nice? You say nice. I say Nice. Let's call the whole thing off. That's as good a way to end as any. Nice is as good a name as Nice. And well, look, I'm just going to I'm going to finish there. I found that really enjoyable. But before I go, I just need to that clock's wrong, so I think I should probably just. Well, thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydoke, and my special guest, Dr. Tom, who can be found on Twitter at Tom Atter or at Dr. T Atter. He's got a new body at last. I'm grateful to him and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Andrew O'Neill, Nev Fountain, Paul Gibbons, John Davey, Paul Sarmer, Julian Botting, James Silk, Michael, Susie Ferguson, Matt Foy, Alan W. Wright, Matthew Toot, Richard Riley, Paul Kirkley, Neil Humphreys, Rebecca Burgess, Collin, David Gates, Mia Murch, El Pandras, Paul Lindblad, John Babb, Jack Sharp, Philip Fitchett, Simon Liss, Roger 1966, Simon Farquhar, David Workman, Brandon Moore, Peter Kelly, Stephen Waters, James Kersey, Matt Metabilis III, Peter Chamberlain, John Ball, Darcy Smart, Scott Sherritt, and Paul Harris. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson.
All right, thanks, Toby. That was really good fun. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and it'd be good to do this again. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
If you too would like to become a member, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month you get advance releases, bonus material. You'll soon, hopefully by the end of next month, be about 6 months ahead for the Happy Times and Places, and a couple of episodes each with Indefinable Magic and Too Much Information. Plus, you get your own exclusive release called Far Too Much Information, every now and again, and you get monthly AMAs, sometimes 2 or 3 of those, looks behind the scenes at my DVD and Blu-ray work, and various other bits and bobs, including comedy and dog pictures. You could become a free member as well. I haven't quite worked out what to do with that, because I feel that if I'm having a page, most of the stuff should be for the people who are kind enough to throw a few coppers into my hat. But I'm working out what to do with the free members. Are you a free member? What would you like? And I don't mean everything for free, but I appreciate the interest. So it's worth striking a balance, isn't it, and working out what to do there. And if you don't want a monthly commitment or to hang around pages of that kind, you can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock and buy me a pretend coffee every now and again if you like what I have done. But what costs you nothing, and there's no commitment at all, is if you can like and subscribe to whichever outlet you get these podcasts from. Thumbs up wherever there's a thumbs up, a 5 stars wherever there's a 5-star rating, and perhaps a few lines as well just really help to polish those algorithms and make other people aware of what's going on with these podcasts, which I hope you continue to enjoy. I'm mostly grateful to you, though, for listening and for being there, and I thank you very much. Now, I'm on all the social media. I am on Facebook. I have a page. Don't try to befriend me on my personal page, because I'm in the process of binning that, apart from doing actually people I do really know. But I do have a page which I still control. It's just I don't have to limit the amount of people I have on it, and I can put pictures of my family Christmas on my personal one, and guide everybody to where I might be doing something that you might find interesting on the professional one. And I think it's wise in this day and age to have that kind of delineation and demarcation. Instagram at Toby.Haydock. That's all work, really. Stuff about my comedy and the various adventures I have on the Doctor Who range. I'm on Twitter, I know, but I'm also, as of this week, as I'm recording this, I have been lured onto Blue Sky. I'm the only person on it called Toby Haydock. You'll know it's me. So go there if you're Blue Sky inclined. That doesn't mean I've left Twitter, though. I don't know what to do. I'm very needy, and I've acquired a lot of people on Twitter, and it makes me very sad to throw all that away. But so let's see how we go. But at the moment, I've just added another one to the list of things that wastes my time. So there we have it. John, I did actually break off at one point there, and I did phone John Levine back, by the way. He just wanted to touch base and wish my partner well, because he knows she's had her health battles. And then we got on to other things. We talked about Richard Franklin, who, of course, died nearly a year ago, died at Christmas last year, who, of course, has been a colleague of John's. And we talked about a few things that John has been up to in terms of... the bits and bobs that I'm sure you'll end up being made aware of, and also, talking about him and what he's up to and the life that he leads. And it's always It's always nice to hear from John. It's always a bit of a roller coaster. We do travel towards sentimentality and then take a sharp U-turn to furious recriminations or observations, and then back to sort of thoughtfulness and philosophy. But it's always nice to touch base with him, and I'm happy to report he's doing okay right now. So that's good. Good for John, who is I think, and I would say this to him, and by all means, I don't mind. There's nothing I would say here that I wouldn't say to John. John is a mercurial sort of fellow, but like all of us, is just doing his best to negotiate this crazy thing called life, and what a life he has led. And we chatted about some of that as well. But nice to touch base with him. But yes, I mean, I wasn't name dropping. I just thought it was quite funny that during the recording of this podcast, which of a story that I watched when I was a kid, grown up me got a call from one of the icons of Doctor Who. Sergeant Benton is a very important character, and John is a very, very special figure in the great landscape of Doctor Who. So there we have it. What a thing. I enjoyed Traken. Hope you did too, and hope you're well. John and I also talked about drooling, but I think that probably needs to remain between us. But the word drool came up, and then John went into detail about what sort of drooling is okay and what sort of drooling is not okay, which is just an insight into the sort of conversations you can only have with John Levine.